It was only my 23rd anniversary, but I was still hoping it would be something special. Unfortunately, a last-minute business conference ruined everything. I finished packing to spend the next 3 days in Baltimore and sat down to grab a bite to eat before I left. "Marcy, I promise I'll fix this for you." Torrenson insisted that I attend this seminar. I looked over the agenda and didn't see anything particularly important, but he's the boss. "Don't worry about it, John. I'll celebrate with you when we go to Europe for our 25th anniversary. We can go someplace nice this weekend when you get back." Marcy and I have been married since college, and we have 2 daughters, Janet and Rachel, who are both in college. I started working at Beeman's International about 10 years ago and have thrived. I spent a lot of time at work and had to travel frequently. Marcy didn't seem to mind and found ways to occupy her time while I was away. Our marriage was strong and our sex life was great. Barring a busy work schedule, I assumed everything was fine in my life. We socialized from time to time, usually at office events, but sometimes with neighborhood friends. Both girls were pretty independent and only relied on us for tuition and some expenses. Both of them worked while they lived on campus. After Marcy and I met, we started dating, and the transition to marriage was natural. There was no stormy affair or storybook episodes. It was all business as usual and rather boring. While I was of average height, Marcy was quite pretty. I was just over 190 centimeters tall and towered over Marcy, who was a good 15 centimeters shorter. She usually wore heels when we went out to equalize our height. She had dark brown hair that was just beginning to show some gray strands. They gave her a sophisticated look. She jogged about 3 times a week to lose weight. Marcy was a beautiful woman, and any man would be proud of her. "I'll call you when I'm settled in and give you the room number. We'll probably be busy most of the afternoon and evening. They have some events scheduled for fairly late in the day. I won't be calling tonight if it drags on." "Don't worry, John. I've got plenty of things to do." The girls brought in some laundry this weekend, and the new edition of book club came in yesterday. "Don't worry about me. I'll see you Friday night." After a quick kiss, I headed to Baltimore. It took a 3-hour drive because I usually took country roads. I hate interstates. The meeting started in the afternoon, so I had plenty of time to get settled in. I called Marcy to let her know I'd gotten there safely. What annoyed me the most was that nothing new was presented. I had read the agenda before coming, but I still expected more. I couldn't understand why they sent me to a conference that was unnecessary. I was very annoyed after the last session in the afternoon when they announced that we were all going to a celebratory dinner at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Although there were 2 in Baltimore, they invited us to Philadelphia, where we had a corporate account. When we arrived in Philadelphia, it was raining. They had reserved 2 special tables for the group in a special meeting room. Considering the prices they charge, I'm sure they didn't want noisy company to annoy paying customers. After we all ordered, I excused myself and went to the men's room. The lighting in the restaurant was dimmed, but I could still make out my wife Marcy sitting at a secluded table with Bob Torrenson. She was dressed to the hilt. It looked like she'd even gotten her hair done. She only goes to the beauty parlor on special occasions, 2 or 3 times a year. Then I remembered that tonight was special because it was our wedding anniversary. As I stood at the other end of the room, everything became much clearer. I now realized why I was doing so many overnight business trips and seminars. I had no idea that Marcy was so close to Bob Torrenson, especially since he was married. We had never socialized with Bob and his wife, and I didn't even know when or how they were able to get involved. At this point, it didn't matter anymore. It seemed our trip to Europe was never meant to be. It was a nice restaurant, and I didn't want to ruin anyone's meal, so I decided to keep a low profile. I retreated to a corner of the room where there was a hallway with a restroom. From there, I could see Marcy as well as the conference room. I was sure Marcy would turn off her cell phone under these circumstances, but she didn't. "Hi, honey, it's John." I called home, but no one answered. Marcy tried to discreetly answer her cell phone. That's hard to do in a crowded, expensive eating establishment. "I'm sorry, John. I was downstairs in the basement and didn't hear the phone ring." "I thought you weren't going to call. What's going on?" There was a look of disgust on Bob's face as Marcy tried to keep her voice down. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm on my way home. The conference ended early. I'll be home in about an hour. See you soon." "What? Wait a minute, John. The washing machine's rattling." Marcy quickly covered the receiver with her hand and spoke to Bob. From the look on her face and her gestures, you could tell that the conversation was very urgent. Bob snatched up his phone and 2 seconds later pressed the speed dial button. Across the room, The conference director was answering his cell phone. The conversation between Bob and the party room was very short. Marcy's face reflected fear as Bob relayed what he had just heard. She slowly brought the phone to her mouth. "John, where are you?" she asked. "I think you know the answer to that question. That black dress looks great on you. It goes well with the pearls I gave you last Christmas. You don't have to come home tonight. I'm moving out tomorrow. Happy anniversary, by the way. John, wait, we need to talk." They always say that. It's probably the stupidest expression a woman caught cheating can have, but they always say that. It was raining like hell when I left the restaurant. My car was in Baltimore, and I was stuck in Philadelphia. I walked towards the center of the city. Not a minute later, I was soaked through. For some reason, I didn't care. My phone rang a few times, but I paid no attention to it. Eventually, I turned it off. I decided it might be wise to conserve the battery. I was worried about missing out on a free Ruth's crisp steak until I walked into the cheesesteak store. I was depressed, but it was the best steak sandwich I've ever had. It probably would have been easiest to rent a car and drive home, but I didn't really want to go home. Home was a cozy place and all my stuff was there, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince myself that going there was necessary. It was only a short walk from the steak shop to the nearest bar. After having 6 drinks, I was ready to go to bed. I woke up in a shabby little room that I'm sure is usually rented out on an hourly basis. The night before, my suit had been completely ruined by the weather. There was a bus stop 3 blocks away. I bought a razor and a tube of some kind of shaving cream from a vending machine, and in a few minutes I looked more or less presentable. A pair of cotton pants and a polo shirt cost me less than $20 at a store closer to town. A charity purchased my suit and white shirt. By then, the banks were open. I don't live in Philadelphia, but most of the banks and other companies I deal with have offices or headquarters there. I quickly closed my current and savings accounts. I even took money out of my girl's college fund. The mortgage lending department at the bank was incredulous when I told them I wanted to cancel my mortgage loan. They were embarrassed by the fact that I had over $60,000 of equity and no need to repossess the house. They had to agree that it was a good deal for them and allowed me to sign the release papers. They also said I had to get my wife's signature. I smiled and told them that was their problem. I canceled my bank credit card after I paid the balance. I had a solid amount accumulated on all of my life insurance policies. The company agreed to mail checks to my sister in Savannah. Fidelity Mutual Funds also agreed to mail checks to my closed account. My cell phone battery was dead, but I was able to borrow a phone from a friendly receptionist to call work. My department head at work was not happy about my leaving. After his counteroffers to keep me failed, he politely demanded a reason why I was leaving so quickly. He didn't like the fact that Bob Torrenson was sending me out to nail my wife. I explained that it had already been done and there was nothing he could do about it. Before transferring me to HR, he promised that Torrenson would be dealt with. The staff was more than willing to mail my last paychecks, profit sharing, sick leave, and accrued vacation pay to my sister. The helpful receptionist also agreed to give me Bob Torrenson's home phone number. I made 2 more phone calls to cancel payment on 2 additional credit cards. An hour later, I was on the bus to Baltimore. I decided to pick up my car and take the few belongings I had in my hotel room. It would take me all day to get from Baltimore to Savannah. My sister Grace and I were close. I decided to explain everything to her and also let her know that she would have some checks coming to her house. I turned on my cell phone to charge it in the car. While it was charging, several calls came in, but I didn't answer any of them. As soon as I got settled, I'd be given a new number. So many hours on the road gives a person a lot of time to think. I was at a complete loss as to what had prompted Marcy to contact Bob Torrenson. I couldn't for the life of me figure out when it might have started or how. Was I somehow an active participant in what happened, or was I completely passive? I guess in some ways I turned out to be a bad husband. After a few hours, I decided that I didn't really care. I no longer felt the need to blame or nag. What's done is done, and there's no changing that. It was time to move on. I regretted that I didn't have my birth certificate, passport, and car license with me. I would have managed or figured out how to get them. I had my laptop and briefcase. I could make do with a car charger for my cell phone because I wouldn't use it much anyway. My health insurance was still valid for 90 days, but I wasn't planning on getting sick. About an hour after flying out of Baltimore, I called Bob Torrenson's wife. It turned out that Bob had been laid off that morning for unspecified reasons. At least that's what he told his wife. She thanked me for explaining things in more detail and promised further retaliation, both for her and for me. I felt that was the least he deserved. I called Grace and let her know I was coming over. "Welcome, my wayward brother." Grace was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. "Your wife called twice trying to track you down, but didn't say why it was so important or why you might be going to visit your sister. I suspect you're going to tell me everything now, or I'm going to have to kick your ass." On the porch were 4 rocking chairs and a refrigerator that I knew must have held beer. Grace was older than me and a little smarter, or should I say wiser. I plopped down next to her. "From the look on your face, I can only assume you didn't see this coming." "I didn't see it coming and I never did. Your little brother is blind and in need of comforting words." Grace handed me a cold bottle of beer with a miserable smile. The rocking chairs were set up just right so we could rest our feet on the porch railing and watch the traffic go by. Grace and her husband Carson bought the old brick 2-story house 20 years ago. Luckily, Carson came in handy because he had to replace half of the wood in the lower part of the building. Termites are a real hell in wet coastal areas. It paid off because it was now part of the Savannah Historic District. I'm assuming infidelity. Am I right? Yes. So who's the rascal who's cheating, Marcy or John? Well, I'm too socially unfit to ever meet another woman, so it must have been her. Grace thought for a moment. I wasn't trying to be nice, but it was hard for me to admit that my wife had cheated on me. God, John, that's something I didn't expect. I never thought Marcy was capable of something like this. How did all this happen? I don't know, and I don't care. Turns out she slept with my boss, and he started sending me out of town on business trips so they could be together. I was just lucky I found out about it. I had no idea. I hadn't discussed any of this with her. I just left. Is there any chance you're wrong? No, she lied to my face when it happened. She was sitting with him at the restaurant, and she told me on the phone she was at home doing laundry. I was 10 meters away from her, watching her. There could be no mistake. Of course, I never caught them in bed or in a motel room, but I'm pretty sure it happened at some point. I assume there will be no reconciliation. It's never going to happen. We drank the second bottle and were silent for about 10 minutes. It was the first time I realized what had happened, and I didn't like it. Why don't you get cleaned up for dinner? Carson will be home in a few minutes. You two can reminisce about old times while I boil some shrimp. He doesn't know anything, so it's up to you if you want to tell him. I won't say anything if you don't want me to. Just tell him I said hi. It's best not to keep something like that a secret. I stayed with Grace and Carson for 2 days. They had 2 sons, both married and on their own. Carson had put on a few pounds, so he had plenty of spare clothes he could put on me. I needed it. Grace agreed to hold on to the checks and any other mail that came in until I got a forwarding address. I had no idea where I would end up. The next day, Marcy called once, but Grace said she hadn't seen me. I asked Grace to call the girls at the college after I left and explain the situation as best I could. It was important to let them know that tuition would be taken care of. I wasn't ready to meet the girls face to face. Before leaving town, I got a new cell phone number and bought 2 pairs of comfortable shoes. I hated the interstate highway, so I ended up taking the old 301 heading south. The nice thing about this neighborhood was that here you could have lunch at Crystal's and breakfast at Waffle House. What more could a man want? The first night I slept in my car, in the parking lot at Walmart, between 2 huge vans. In addition to dining, one of the nice things about Crystal is the free Wi-Fi. I didn't really have a pressing need to use the internet, but it was nice to know it was available if I needed it. I was driving along the St. John's River somewhere in the Palatka area when things took a turn for the better. It was mid-morning, and I stopped for gas at a small gas station that served as both a dock and a restaurant. It was a backwater about 100 meters off the main road, but visible from the bridge crossing the river. The parking lot was strewn with gravel. And the dock, which had known better days, looked like it had once been a marina. The restaurant was a 2-story building, half standing on the dock, half on land. It hadn't been painted in at least 10 years. Across the street stood 3 mobile homes that were at least as old as the restaurant's paint job. The gas station appeared to have been built for boaters who happened to be on the water. A sign out front read, Sadie's Fish House. I had worked at Captain D's all through high school, so I felt an attack of nostalgia. I cautiously made my way down to the river. The place was in need of repair. 2 teenage boys sat on the dock and just watched the water. From the back of the restaurant came loud voices, male and female. I got the impression that the boys were there to avoid what was going on inside. It looked like someone was doing a pretty good job there. I tried to be polite, but not intrusive. They both looked at me. The older of the two broke out into a smile. Charlie came to work drunk again. Mom wants to fire him, but he's the only cook she can hire. If he leaves, she'll have to close the place down. She can't cook and serve tables at the same time. I assume you guys are helping her. The restaurant sells beer, so by state law, Josh and I can't work the lounge until we turn 18. We can help in the kitchen, but that doesn't help Mom much. About this time, Charlie fell out of the kitchen through the back door. It was obvious from his unsuccessful attempts to get up that he was drunk. And don't even think about coming back, motherfucker. That was my first contact with Loretta Fields, a Cajun lost in Florida. She stood in the kitchen doorway with fire in her eyes. Charlie was lucky she didn't have anything in her hands because she probably would have launched it at him. Loretta was about 180 centimeters tall and all muscle. The uniform she wore didn't suit her, and it was obvious she wasn't very well dressed. I don't normally look at a woman's breasts, but in this case their absence was noticeable. I chastised myself for being such a dumbass and tried to put that childish remark out of my mind. She had shoulder-length brown hair and sharp cheekbones that accentuated her dark brown eyes. The lack of makeup made her appearance even less feminine. She was a rugged woman who had definitely had a hard life. She stood, chin up, as Charlie walked down the dock and across the parking lot. "What the hell are you looking at?" It seemed she was just as pissed at me as she was at Charlie. "My name is John Wilson. I was looking for a job." I don't know what made me say that. I wasn't looking for a job, but at the time I thought it was the best thing to say. Something about this whole conversation gave the boys a fit of laughter. "Josh, Terry, get your asses in the house and start getting ready for dinner. There is nothing funny about this, and I don't approve of your attitude." As the boys ran inside, the Wicked Witch of the South turned her attention back to me. "My name is Loretta. Do you have any restaurant experience?" "I worked in a restaurant for 2 years in food preparation." "I don't know everything, but I know how to navigate the kitchen. I can't explain why I persisted in playing this game, but its fascination fascinated me. I was sure it would end quickly, but at that moment I was mesmerized. My first day on the job as a cook at Sadie's Catfish House went pretty well. I mixed up a few orders, but nothing serious. The guys were very helpful in explaining the standard procedures and finding me the products I needed. It was mostly making bread and roasts. I was more familiar with fish cooked in batter, but it was pretty much the same there. The biggest problem for me was cleaning the fryers after lunchtime. I don't think they were cleaned last year. They had an oil filter system installed that was pretty easy to use but still dirty. Loretta and I spent most of the afternoon getting ready for dinner. I quickly learned how to make cabbage stew from her recipe. She went through the entire menu to see if I had any questions. Mostly it was catfish. Although we didn't discuss anything, I got the feeling that she was under the assumption that I was a regular. I was flattered and intrigued. I needed some way to kill time, and this was fun. After the evening cleanup, Loretta treated me to a cold cocktail, and we sat down to talk. "In case I forgot, I want to thank you for helping me out of my predicament today. I really appreciate you being here." "No problem. For $20 an hour, I'm willing to do anything." "Hoa, hold your horses. Where the hell did the $20 figure come from?" "Just trying to figure out how grateful you really were." "Charlie gets $6 an hour." "I don't need that. I can't afford to pay you what you want. I can bump it up a little bit, but don't get greedy. 6 is fine, Mrs. Fields. My big problem is a place to stay. Me and the boys live in one of the trailers across the street. Mabel, the owner of this whole barracks, lives in the big one. I rent the restaurant from her. Her son Clyde runs a gas station. He lives in the 3rd trailer. There's a storage room upstairs, but no furniture or plumbing. You can use the restroom in the restaurant, and I'll let you shower in the trailer. How much is this luxury suite going to cost me? How about free overtime? I pay you for a 40-hour work week, and everything else you do above that is free." "You work every day?" "I close on Mondays. Today I'm at the beauty parlor. I decided that her humor matched her personality. How could I not like this woman? The first night in the warehouse was rough. It was dusty, dirty, and the floor was hard. Still, I gave the Subaru a good thrashing. The best part was that I had a fully equipped kitchen to make my own breakfast. After a week, I was getting pretty well settled in. I called Grace and gave her the address. She had a half-dozen letters to send, which I hoped had checks in them. The first Monday, I went to the Palaka and opened a bank account and safe deposit box. I finally got rid of all the cash I had been carrying around. I took the boys with me and bought some used furniture. They were happy to help and I enjoyed their company. I was uncomfortable showering in Loretta's trailer. I felt like I was imposing on her. With PVC pipe and a little time, I was able to construct an outdoor shower behind the restaurant. It looked like a changing house and worked out pretty well as long as it wasn't too cold outside. The guys helped me with the shower and even tried it out first. Loretta's husband died on an offshore rig 8 years ago. He stayed on the rig during a hurricane and things didn't go well. She got some insurance from the deal and used it to open a restaurant. She and Mabel seemed to get along pretty well. Josh and Terry spent a lot of time with me. I think they were looking for a father. My relationship with their mother remained strictly professional. There were a few moments when I thought of her a little differently, but I didn't want to risk ruining a good relationship. It was time to check on my daughters. Luckily, they were both attending the University of Pennsylvania, so I only had to call once. I could tell by the sound of her voice that it was Rachel. "Hi, it's your dad. I just thought it was time to call you girls." "Is Janet there too?" "Janet's in class. We were all wondering when you were going to call." Mom's hysterical but evasive at the same time. "Janet, and I think we need your version of what happened. What the hell is going on?" "I'm sorry it's come to this, darling. For starters, how does your mother explain what's going on? She claims she arranged a romantic anniversary dinner for the two of you at a steakhouse. Your boss helped her organize it. When you got to the restaurant, you saw them together and freaked out. She didn't have a chance to explain to you what had happened. She seemed very upset. Wow, that's a great story, Rachel. Unfortunately, it's just a story. Your mom had no idea I was going to be at that restaurant. When I showed up, she was shocked and surprised. I called her at the restaurant before she knew I was there. She told me she was at home doing laundry. When she discovered I was watching her from across the room, she freaked out. It wasn't a surprise party. My boss and your mother arranged for me to be out of town so they could meet. I caught her and she's trying to cover her ass. That makes more sense than her version. What do you want us to do? And why are you calling from Savannah? I'm not in Savannah, I just had a phone there. Don't be too hard on your mom, but try to get her to tell you the truth. That's it. What else should we do? If you're going home for Thanksgiving, go into the office and dig up my passport, birth certificate, and Subaru papers. Mail them to your Aunt Grace. She can make sure I get them. Don't tell your mom, and for heaven's sake, don't give her my cell phone number. I don't want to change it again. I'm sorry about everything, Dad. Janet and I are always here for you if you need anything. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I have all the money for your tuition, so you don't have to worry. I felt better once all that was taken care of. Even though I didn't feel like telling Rachel about her mom, I had no doubt that Rachel believed what I told her. Marcy's story was interesting, and I think it was the best thing she could have said under the circumstances, but it didn't hold up to criticism. I was dying to know more about the affair, but it wasn't worth the agony. Business at the Catfish House was still going well. I got the checks from Grace, as well as the papers the girls had sent. I would be able to buy new automobile tokens in Florida when they ran out. I transferred my paycheck from the restaurant to my bank account, but kept all the rest of my money in a safety deposit box. The interest rates were so low that I didn't feel like I was losing anything, and the money was safer there. I ate at work all week, so on Mondays I looked forward to going out and doing something else. I had no trouble getting the boys to go with me. Loretta naturally tagged along behind me. It was my treat, and although neither of us would admit it, it was something of a date. The Chinese buffet cafe seemed to be my favorite, but they all loved the sushi too. Sometimes we had to take quite a long drive, but I didn't mind. Loretta softened noticeably. Since that first day, I didn't notice the anger in her anymore. Sometimes I thought I caught her eye as we worked, but she quickly averted her eyes. I was still married, but Loretta was starting to look good. The restaurant was running steadily, but making barely enough money to cover expenses. I was living on practically pennies. The money Loretta paid me went to the bank. I had almost no living expenses. I bought a full tank of gas every month and spent Monday nights with my family. I have no idea why I began to think of Josh, Terry, and Loretta as family. It just happened to work itself out. Mabel had lunch at Sadie's every day, free of course. It was noticeable that she was a little tired of the menu. I was just a salaried employee, and the place was Loretta's, so I kept my mouth shut, but my eyes and ears open. Most of our clientele were local guys who I think were more interested in the beer than the food. Just before Christmas, I got a call from Janet. Dad, how are you doing? I think I'm okay. I have no complaints. Are you starting school again? Next month. Just wanted to make sure you'll be okay for the vacation. I'm fine. I assume you and Rachel will be with your mom? Yeah, but we're not looking forward to it, especially now that we know the whole story. You want to bring me up to speed? You're not going to like it, but you were right about the whole situation, Mom and Mr. Torrenson dated for over a year. Eventually, she admitted that they had a full-fledged sexual relationship. She didn't want a divorce, but she didn't want to stop seeing him either. She said she hoped to keep things the way they were because to her, it was perfect. The main thing apparently was the sex. She started telling us something, and Rachel and I had to ask her to shut up. We didn't want to know the details. Rachel hardly ever talks to her mom. You're right, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know. What's her relationship with Torrenson now? Oh, she doesn't have one. He got fired from his job and he blamed it on her. His wife filed for divorce, and he blamed Mom for that too. Last I heard, he moved to Chicago and didn't ask Mom to go with him. Mom got a job at an insurance company answering phones. After you left, she ran out of money very quickly and couldn't even pay her utility bills. Now she is just starting to make ends meet, but I think she is selling off her jewelry and stuff. The bank told her that she wouldn't have to make any more house payments if she signed an authorization. I think she will try to sell it instead. I will send you a power of attorney form to make it easier for your mother to sell the house. You can give it to her when you get home for Christmas. She'll probably appreciate it. She was wondering why you haven't filed for divorce yet. I'm not going to. When she's ready, she'll have to. I have no money, no job, and I'm living on what I took out of the bank when I left. It'll be over very soon. I saw no reason to let my daughters or my wife know that I have a nice stash in the tent bank where I am waiting for my release day. My wife never showed any interest in our finances, and unless she hired a really good lawyer, she would never know. I figured she would go to the cheapest lawyer she could find. I'll let her know when we get there. Janet, I'm sorry I didn't get you girls anything for the holidays this year. I'll try to make it up to you, I promise. After the school year is over, let us know where you are and we can visit you over spring break. Then you can make it up to us. It's a deal. Merry Christmas. For the last month or so, I've been forced to shower at Loretta's. While I was there, she always found something else to do, so there was no opportunity to break the rules of decorum. It can get cold in North Florida, so I needed to utilize her services for a couple months. I had reached the point where a little inappropriate behavior on her part would be appreciated. I wasn't courteous enough to arrange something like this. I was afraid that if I did something wrong, it would make her angry. Usually when I showered, the boys were at school. After not getting my daughters anything for Christmas, I felt guilty when I bought the boys new Game Boys and Loretta a turquoise necklace. She always wore collarless blouses, and I couldn't help but imagine how good she would look with matching accessories. On Christmas Eve, we closed the Catfish house early and opened presents. Loretta and the boys got me a GPS unit for my Subaru. We gorged ourselves on boiled shrimp and whole crawfish. It was fun for a while, but the boys wanted to play with their new toys. Loretta told them to go home and not to wait for her. Terry winked and showed me a thumbs up as they left. It looked like the holiday promised to be a good one. Loretta and I talked for about an hour. We avoided any mention of previous spouses. Even though I was still married, Loretta didn't seem to mind. Since I was very slow to absorb information, she eventually took my hand and led me upstairs. We both had months of contained frustration that was about to break through. It was a contest to see which one of us would take off our clothes first. Loretta had the body of a weightlifter. She had well-defined abs like the girls in the Bowflex commercials. Instead of soft breasts, she had wonderful firm balls. Even after having 2 children, she had no hint of posture. My admiration for the lack of jewelry on her breasts was unwarranted. She was truly beautiful. Even though we were both naked, we kissed passionately. I had no idea what to do with my hands while this was going on. Our sweat-covered bodies lay side by side. Not noticing that the room wasn't as hot, I bent over her and covered us with a light blanket. Loretta purred softly in appreciation. We cuddled under the blanket for a few minutes, and then she lifted her head and said, "Merry Christmas, John Wilson." Hearing the boys' footsteps downstairs, Loretta jumped out of bed and started to get dressed. When I came downstairs, the boys were already eating breakfast. Terry smiled broadly at me and gave me another thumbs up. I don't think Josh realized what was going on. I ate with the boys while their mom went home to take a shower. That time I had a horrible thought about birth control. After that, sex between Loretta and me became a regular occurrence. She didn't usually stay the night, but sometimes it was nice. I think it wasn't long after vacation that Terry explained to Josh how things were going in life. Both boys seemed fine with that arrangement. Grace had forwarded the divorce papers at the beginning of the school year. Marcy enclosed a small note thanking me for the power of attorney and informing me that she had an offer on the house. The divorce was simple and to the point. I was in charge of the girls' school, and that was the end of it. I signed it and sent it back to Marcy's attorney. I realized I had given away my secret whereabouts, but I didn't care anymore. Loretta asked me if I had any ideas for the restaurant menu. She more or less gave me complete freedom to change whatever I wanted. I hesitated to ask her if I could do that, but I appreciated her trust in me when she suggested it. The seafood wholesaler was more than happy to add several packages of frozen whitefish portions to our weekly supply of catfish. Terry was thrilled to learn how to make fish and chips. Of course, it was just an American version of a British staple dish. Loretta and I ran everything during the school year. The business was growing slowly but steadily, so we were able to handle it without a problem. Neither of us anticipated the consequences of expanding the business. On weekends, I had the boys cook. My demands weren't too high, so I was quite happy with what they were doing. The whole place belonged to Loretta, but I got the feeling that she wanted me to take over most of the work. At first, I would just suggest things, but as time went on, she seemed relieved that I was just making decisions on my own. She never criticized or complained about what I was doing. I was never interested in doing this kind of business. However, it seemed to be becoming my destiny. I apologize if that sounds a bit deep. Clyde caught my fever and even repainted the gas station. With a quick call to his distributor, he purchased shiny new signs and even some new pumps, which required credit cards. After he got everything in order, the salesman talked him into installing some racks to sell all sorts of travel goods. It cost Clyde no charge, and he got his share of whatever was sold. It gave the establishment a less lowbrow look. Terry turned 16 and got his learner's permit. I had a lot of fun teaching him how to drive an SUV. I think Loretta was glad she didn't have to do that. In 2 years, it would be Josh's turn. One day, a nice guy from around Moss Bluff brought in a truck full of refrigerator full of alligator tail meat. He spent 30 minutes trying to convince me of the nutritional benefits of eating reptiles. He was not bad at the subject, but he was a poor salesman. I tried to pretend I was interested so as not to offend him. Besides, he had some frozen turtle in his truck. I got the impression that he thought it wasn't going too well when he made a smart move. "I'll leave you 5 pounds of alligator tails and 5 pounds of turtle to try for free. I'll be back in a week to see how things are going. You mind, mister?" He took me by surprise. Then I got cocky and he threw a punch. Sure, I'd be glad to give it a try. Any cooking suggestions? Most people just like it battered, breaded, and fried. If I decide I like it, how much will it cost me? He reached into the back and handed me a green piece of paper with prices, phone numbers, and state permit numbers for alligator and sea turtle meat. Depending on the portions I served, there could be a nice profit to be made on what he had if I could sell it. "Thank you, Mr. Coletta. I'd be happy to give it a try. I'll see you in a week." His name, phone number, and address were listed at the top of the sheet. The fish and chips part of the menu was to our liking. At first, we only had it for dinner when Terry was free, but we ended up eating it all day. The alligator and turtle ran out before the end of the week, and I had to call Tom Collette to order more. The combination dish of alligator, turtle, and catfish turned out to be the most popular dish. Things went faster than we expected. Loretta and I usually did the dishes after the meal. We had enough dishes to provide normal customer service. As the number of customers increased, we found ourselves running short of clean dishes. That's when we hired Hector. Hector didn't speak English well, but he knew how to wash dishes and never complained. He rode his bicycle to the restaurant every day and worked for both lunch and dinner. I have no idea where he lived. When Tom Coletta delivered the alligator and turtle the following Saturday, he brought a young girl with him. Terry happily agreed to help move the bags of frozen meat from the truck. Loretta and I noticed that he kept his eyes on the girl and at one point even tripped. She looked to be Terry's age, maybe a little older. Loretta seemed pleased with the whole scene, and that night at dinner, we all began to tease him about it. The end of February brought a few surprises. We had just opened and I was just getting the fryers ready when Loretta came back into the kitchen. "Surprise, John, you have a visitor, your wife is here." Loretta said it without expression. I couldn't tell if she was sad, happy, concerned, or something else. Taking a deep breath, I walked out into the dining room to see Marcy for the first time in many months. She was as beautiful as ever. Her hair and makeup were flawless, and the outfit she was wearing emphasized her figure. Loretta stayed in the kitchen. "Hello, John. You're not easy to find. You look good yourself. I wasn't expecting to see you. Is there any particular reason for this visit?" I could see she was nervous. She was biting her lower lip and shifting from foot to foot. "I just wanted to hand you a copy of the final divorce decree. It went faster than usual, and I thought you'd want it as soon as possible." She handed me a folded document that I didn't bother to unfold. The house was sold and occupied, so I brought a check for half the amount. It was only $23,000. I didn't realize the realtor's commission would be so high. She handed me the cashier's check, which I noticed had my name on it. I took the check from her and signed the back. As I handed the check back to her, she looked at me questioningly. "I don't want the money, Marcy. You can keep it. It'll get you started. Just curious, what are your plans?" "I've sold everything but my clothes. I'm going to visit my sister in Dallas. She got me a job where she works. The girls have promised to come visit me next summer. I hope it works out for you. Do you have any questions, or is there anything you want to talk about before I go?" "No, not really. I'm fine. I don't need to know, or I don't want to know more than I know right now. In fact, I can only handle having you here. Thanks for handing over the papers. I'm sorry, but I have to get back to work now. Everyone who's coming for lunch will be gathering soon." I turned and walked to the kitchen without looking back. I tried not to be rude, but I didn't want to stay with her any longer than necessary. Many would say I was cold, but I didn't care. There was nothing I could do to her to atone for what she had done to me. Loretta stood in the kitchen looking out at the river. There was still no expression on her face. I walked to the other end of the room and looked across the parking lot. Marcy had just gotten into her car and, sitting in the driver's seat, was crying. A minute later she was gone, and I would never see her again. "I'm sorry, Loretta. I didn't know she'd show up here. I don't even know how she found me. I know it's none of my business, but what did she want?" She gave me a copy of the final divorce decree. "She's free to go now. What about you?" I wasn't so lucky. I fell into the trap of the beautiful Cajun queen again. I guess I just have a thing for stunning women. I don't see a ring on your finger. How about tomorrow? I finally got an answer. There was a wide smile on her face as she wrapped her arms around my neck. After a few minutes of passionate kissing, she pulled away and looked at me. "Do you remember our Christmas Eve together?" "Of course I do." "How could I forget? Well, congratulations. You're about to become a daddy. The next day we got married, and I moved out of the warehouse. The boys were as happy as I was. Mabel stopped coming to the restaurant to eat. Loretta would bring light appetizers or soup to her trailer after the hustle and bustle subsided. Clyde sat down with Loretta and I and told her it was time for her to go to a nursing home. She had to sell a marina complex to get into one. At that point it wasn't a marina yet, but we didn't know what to call it. Mabel was still as judicious and sharp as a whiplash. I didn't say anything to Loretta when Mabel and I started negotiating. It took most of my stashed money, but I ended up buying everything from Mabel, including the trailers. The only concession I had to make was for Clyde. I agreed to let him run the gas station and boat docks. I would pay him a salary plus free lodging in his trailer. It was a good deal for me because the station brought in more than his paycheck. I installed a dishwasher in the kitchen. That made Hector very happy. We hired a waitress to help Loretta around the house, hoping that Loretta would be trained by the deadline. The waitress was a single mom with 2 kids. She was thrilled when we offered to rent her an empty trailer at a reasonable price. Epilogue. Year after year went by and the marina blossomed. Business was better than we expected. We added shrimp dishes that could be cooked on the boat, cleaned and eaten for the female customers. Before the summer was over, we had a dozen full-time boats on new listings, and a waiting list for all the new places that were opening up. Money wasn't an issue, just time. I was happy and content. Terry had a strong relationship with Tom Coletta's daughter, Tracy. Josh made the most of the opportunities he had. Josh ended up working with Clyde. He asked his mom if he could take over the gas station when Clyde retired. We didn't know that Clyde was planning to retire, and we were sure it would be in a couple of years. Terry wanted to stay at the restaurant. After spending a few days with their mother, Janet and Rachel came and spent the rest of the summer helping around the house. They stayed in the pantry. They never mentioned their mother. Loretta got along great with my daughters. It is said that the father's genes determine the sex of the child. In September, Loretta had a baby girl. We named her Mabel. As our first wedding anniversary approached, Loretta asked me where I wanted to go to celebrate. I said, anywhere but a steakhouse.